All right, hello again. I welcome you to today's webinar, VISTA Member Retention 201, Responding to Member Challenges. I'm Jessica Birch from the Corporation for National and Community Service, and I'll be your host for today's webinar. And I'll also be facilitating the live Q&A at the end of this session. Also joining us are Rachel Raddick and Jenny Farrell from our partners at Education Northwest, who have helped to prepare today's webinar and will be managing the WebEx technology. You'll also see them in the chat and Q&A to help address questions you may have during the session. So, the learning objectives. What do we hope you're going to get out of this webinar? So, first and foremost, we want you to understand the importance of communication skills. I'm sure that you guys have experienced with all this. You guys are supervisors, you have to deal with those challenges, but sometimes dealing with VISTAs is a little bit unique than your everyday employee. So, we hope that you can understand the importance of skills, communication skills such as listening, giving and receiving feedback to support that productive relationship with your VISTA member. And we also hope that you can implement practical solutions for dealing with those unfortunate, difficult situations if they come up. I am pleased to welcome our main speakers today. First is Mike Beebe. Mike decided to take his passion for leadership development and start Leadership for Change training and consulting in 2004. Since then, he has worked with thousands of individuals and groups to help develop their leadership skills. Mike has over 20 years of experience managing youth and adult leadership programs and is passionate about partnering with young people to create positive social change. His experience includes directing Penny Harvest Seattle, a youth philanthropy and service learning program, Just Serve AmeriCorps, a youth anti-violence program, Teen Link, a hotline for youth answered by youth, and serving on the board of directors for Collage, Children of Lesbians and Gays Everywhere, a national organization advocating for the rights of LGBT families. Mike has also been a part of a national team of VISTA trainers and facilitators, and we are happy to have him here as our key presenter. We also have Erin O'Day Fry. Erin brings a wealth of knowledge from 20-plus years of supervising individuals in counseling and educational settings. She enjoys developing individuals to reach their full potential. Through her experience supervising teachers and after-school programs, young professionals in youth residential settings, and high school and college students in work-study positions, she has developed a keen ability to identify and work with individual strengths while addressing challenges and providing timely interventions. In the 7 years that Erin has served as project director for the Allegheny College's Lake Effect Leaders VISTA project, she has supervised more than 150 members. So now, I'm going to turn it over to Mike to start us off. Mike, take it away.
Thank you, Jessica. Hello, and thank you for joining us today, and thanks for that thorough intro. I'll be weaving a little bit more in about my experience in a moment, but first, I'd like to pause before we dive into the content to learn a bit about you and your experience supervising VISTA members. Please take a minute to answer our poll question. How comfortable do you feel responding to member challenges? You'll see that poll question on the right side of your screen. I'll give you a moment to do that.
Thanks, Mike. So yeah, so please respond to the poll on the right of your screen. Your other panel should have collapsed. How comfortable do you feel responding to member challenges? I know there's not this option on here, but I think I'd be like, oh, I don't want to. I don't know if I would feel that comfortable. So are you very comfortable, somewhat, not comfortable, or maybe you have been fortunate and have never had to respond to a member challenge? That would be the life, right? So just take a few seconds, do that. We promise we're not going to quiz you on it later. We just kind of want to see where you're starting out at, kind of what experience you've had in this. These are great because we really get to hear from other supervisors. You guys get to hear from your peers. So it's really great to know where all of you are coming from since you share, the experience of supervising VISTAs, which I mentioned before can be a unique experience. So looks like the poll is closed. So we are going to wait for those poll results to tally. It is, the anticipation is killing me, so let's see what it's going to be. Mike, what do you think? Oh,
here we go.
All right. All right. So, Mike, do you want to read out these, or you want me to read them out, or you want to go ahead and look at them?
Go ahead, Jessica, and read them off.
Yeah.
And people be ready for my next piece here.
All right, yeah, it looks like most people are somewhat comfortable. The next one, I'm kind of surprised, is very comfortable. Some people feel really comfortable about responding to member challenges. There's a good portion that didn't answer. That's okay. This is what this webinar is about. So, Mike, I'm going to turn it back on over to you.
Great. Thanks, Jessica. Yeah, our hope is that by the end of this call that you will have a higher level of comfort. We won't be polling you again, but our hope is we move people more up in terms of level of comfort. So when you registered for today's webinar, many of you shared member challenges you've experienced or are currently experiencing. While we won't be able to discuss all these challenges, some common themes arose that we do want to make sure to address, or that I will with help of my other presenter. As Jessica mentioned, I have worked over 25 years directing nonprofit programs. Most of that time has been in Seattle, Washington. I'm supervising staff, VISTA members, and volunteers. In my role as a VISTA supervisor, I have personally experienced many of the challenges you shared when registering for this webinar. I've heard and observed many of the challenges that come up between VISTAs and their supervisors, also in my current role as trainer and coach. I can reflect back to the first time I got started supervising VISTA members, and I felt a bit lost. Well, a bit is an understatement, really lost on how to be effective when challenges came along. Through hands-on experience, helpful training, I became much more confident in my supervisory skills. I'll also add lots of helpful feedback from VISTAs along the way on how to be more effective. So today I'm honored to get to share some of my perspective on what I found effective in addressing VISTA member challenges along the way. When reviewing your responses to common challenges you've experienced as a VISTA supervisor, these common themes arose. One, this is my VISTA member's first job and they lack professionalism. So challenges related to your VISTA member being new to the workforce or being new to office culture and professional behaviors. Two, my VISTA is doing everything wrong, but I don't know how to tell them. So challenges related to VISTAs not having the skills necessary to complete certain tasks. Three, my VISTA member seems unmotivated. So challenges related to a VISTA who may seem unmotivated. And then the last challenge, it's unclear how much responsibility my VISTA member is ready for. So challenges related to delegating and the different roles of a supervisor. You know, also know you're all very busy. So let's look at that first challenge as a way into the content we're going to cover. Challenge one, this is my VISTA member's first job. Well, we're going to encourage you during this webinar to think of yourself as a coach. You may already do so. We'll provide some kind of definition for that as well. Some VISTA members may be just entering the workforce. In fact, this could be their first full-time job. One of my supervisees, in fact, one of my first AmeriCorps members once told me she had never had to manage her own time using a calendar before. And it really blew my mind. I was like, I had no idea that the basic organizational skills I've always used could be foreign to a new employee. So as supervisors, it's important to think of yourself as a coach. What does this member need to be successful in their first job? So let's look at what it means to be a coaching supervisor. So that first point, a coaching supervisor can respond effectively to member challenges through the use of key skills such as listening, inquiry, and giving and receiving feedback. Supervising is all about communicating, asking questions, clarifying expectations, and providing feedback to foster a productive work relationship. Also about creating a shared understanding of projects, timelines, direction, and vision to ensure that your member meets your expectations. Likewise, your relationship with your member is about collaborating to maximize outcomes, which you can do better together. A good portion of our webinar today is going to focus on how to be an effective coaching supervisor. Second point on your slide there, the coaching supervisor increases their effectiveness by understanding key concepts from the situational leadership model. The situational leadership model offers a helpful framework for understanding when coaching is most needed by our VISTA members. As we understand better the level of experience and confidence of our VISTA members have with specific tasks, the more easily we can adapt our leadership style to meet their needs. Some of you may be familiar with this model. It was created in the late 60s by Paul Hersey and Ken Blanchard at Ohio University. And so Ohio is actually where I'm originally from, and became well known in the 80s when Ken Blanchard published his popular book, Leadership and the One-Minute Manager. This model is a process for developing people by providing effective leadership over time so that they can reach their highest level of performance. It's based upon a relationship between an individual's developmental level on a specific goal or task. When we say developmental level, it's a combination of both competence and commitment. And then matching that developmental level with a leadership style, so various combinations of directive and supportive behavior. And let's take a look at the next slide. We'll start with the developmental levels. You also, please note, before I review the situational leadership model in detail, I'd like to remind everyone to refer to the handouts which accompany this webinar. Handouts include a copy of the visuals you will see on this slide and the next. I will be referring to the contents on these handouts throughout the webinar, so please have them handy. And if you don't, I think you'll be able to see the slide and be able to follow along. Let's start by looking here at the developmental levels in this model. These levels are more easily understood by using a real-life example. Let's take the example of learning to ride a bicycle as a discrete task. At age 6, I started to learn how to ride a bicycle. I was very excited, so I was high in commitment. I didn't know how to start or stop balance, so I was low in competence. This stage is called level 1, starting on the right side of your screen, the enthusiastic beginner. Level 2, disillusioned learner. Once I got up on the bicycle and started pedaling, the inevitable happened. I fell and it hurt. I remember thinking, maybe I don't want to ride my bicycle. Thus, the disillusioned learner stage. I became low in commitment. Excitement waned. I had learned how to do a few things, but I was still low in competence when it came to riding a bicycle. So as we move to the left side of the slide, D3 is the reluctant contributor. I finally learned to ride my bicycle. I could pedal, balance, steer without any help from a parent, or in my case, a neighbor adult friend taught me. At this point, I was moderate to high competence and variable commitment because I still wasn't allowed to bicycle off the block. So bicycling became less exciting over time since I had been up and down the block thousands of times with my neighbor alongside me. Now, as we move further left on your slide, developmental level 4, peak performer. Finally, over time, I was allowed to bicycle throughout my neighborhood on my own. High competence, high commitment, bicycle on my own, it's fun. So those are the developmental levels. Let's look at the leadership styles. As we think about these leadership styles, I can refer back to that example in a moment. As you look at this screen, there's a lot going on it. There's 4 leadership styles. Style 1 is called directing. That's in your bottom right-hand side of the screen on our visual. Style 2 is called coaching as we move up to the upper right-hand side. Style 3 is supporting as we move to the upper left-hand side. And style 4 is delegating the lower left-hand side. The goal of situational leadership 2, the official name of this model, is to match the leadership style that is appropriate to an individual's developmental level at each stage of development on a specific goal or task. So I'll repeat that over and over. It's by task. Let's revisit the example of learning to ride a bicycle to understand the leadership styles better. As an enthusiastic beginner, I was very excited to learn how to ride a bike. I did not need encouragement. However, I did need step-by-step instruction. The leadership style I needed was directing. So that's the S1 style, it's high directive and low supportive behavior. When I fell off the bike, I became a disillusioned learner. The leadership style I needed was coaching, high directive, high supportive. I needed someone who would give me both further instruction on how to ride a bicycle, but also lots of encouragement. So that's the S2 leadership style, high directive, high supportive. After I became able to balance and pedal, I became a bit bored and needed another challenge. I needed to be given more independence on how far and fast I biked. Leadership style I was looking for was supporting, low directive and high supportive. So that's S3, that upper left-hand corner of your visual. Finally, as a peak performer, I could ride my bike without direction and support. At this point, I needed my coach to adopt the style of delegating, low directive and low supportive behavior. So that's S4. So if we're using a driving metaphor, that's literally the stage in which I hand the keys off to my kid. My kid's 4 right now, so I'm not quite ready to do that yet. But she is learning to ride a bicycle, so it would be the stage at which I would let her ride on her own on her bicycle. So I have found this model quite helpful in understanding member retention, the title of our webinar today, and when we're most likely to have VISTA members quit their service. They leave VISTA positions when their needs are not being met. Often members leave when supervisors are not applying coaching skills at the right time. The effective situational leader understands how to adapt their style to meet the needs of members. So let me share an example again, and we'll move off the bicycle example into something that is more likely to happen at your site. Your VISTA member, for example, is asked to recruit 12 volunteers for the fall volunteer orientation, and only 3 people show up. The member is very frustrated and becomes the disillusioned learner. This member needs a supervisor who is directing. They need to be reminded of the specific steps that they can take to be more effective in their recruitment, but they also need a supervisor who shows supportive behavior, pointing out things members did well, giving a pep talk. The disillusioned learner who does not get coaching at this point can get increasingly frustrated and quit. Thinking back to that first challenge of this is my VISTA's first job, it's quite likely that this type of member has low competence in many aspects of the VISTA position and will need a very directive approach to supervision, step-by-step instruction. Here is my recommendation, and I recommend this over and over at trainings that I lead almost every other week these days. Sit down with your VISTA and look at their VAD, in case you don't know that acronym yet, VISTA assignment description together, and identify the developmental level they are at in each of the major task areas. So, for example, if there's volunteer recruitment, donor development, partnership building, allow your VISTA member to first identify their level of competence and commitment for each major task. Listen and then give your input. Let's hear from you. So the real work of the supervisor is being an effective coach. Think about someone you consider a great mentor or coach. What skills did they have that made them an effective coach? Please enter your ideas in the chat box and make sure you send to all participants. We want your comments to be visible to everyone, so please be sure to enter them in the chat panel and not in the Q&A panel further down the screen.
Thanks, Mike, and thank you for that information. I love the graph because I think it really the little, I don't know if that's considered still a bell curve, but a little bell curve there almost. Just kind of seeing where you are and getting that visual of what does my person need, and the bike example is always really great. I can't even go back to the days that I was learning to ride a bike, but it's great that your daughter is and not yet a car.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, I also find when we have shared language around it, the member and supervisor, and that helps have the conversation in sort of a less charged fashion. People will say, oh yeah, I think I'm a D2 or D3 in that. So, and we can think about, oh, here's what I need to be supported. So
yeah, it's definitely better than low competence. Like,
yeah.
Don't want that. Yeah. So let's see. So we have some great things coming in here. So what are some key things as an effective coach? A lot of you are saying that someone was easy to talk to, open, encouragement, that they believed in you, which is so helpful, compassionate, especially in the work that we do, working at nonprofits, the work that VISTAs do. Compassion is a big part of what drives us. So having compassion for one another is great. They're well organized, prepared, positive, patient. Those are all extremely good things to have in a coach.
Jessica, I would just note, sorry to interrupt, but big, bold, clear boundaries. I think that is very helpful to be clear about what boundaries are in the workplace, and both a two-way conversation with that too, both the supervisor and the member.
No, that's great. Yeah, I mean, definitely making sure that, you know, that they can communicate and that those boundaries, that they know what the boundaries are for the organization and also for their community. Making sure you're setting them up for success and not, you know, having them flounder is always a great thing. And along with that, clear expectations. So along with boundaries, making sure that they understand what's expected of them and what they shouldn't be doing and what they should be doing. And I know Erin is going to talk a little bit more about that later, about, you know, even just simple things like, if you're going to be late, should I text you? Should I call you? Should I email you? What exactly are those expectations? Some other ones here, Andrew here said that an effective coach is available, approachable, and knowledgeable, and they're supportive and able to help solve problems. So yeah, so definitely making sure that, you know, you don't want someone who is not approachable, because then you never want to approach them. A good listener, that they take the time to teach and mentor. And this one's really great. Let's end on this one. Christy here said that they were knowledgeable about their position and had clear expectations of what my role in the agency would be and valued my input. And Mike, I think because you facilitate PSO, I think you can hear this I'm sure you have an opinion on this as well, but being knowledgeable about what's in that VISTA assignment description and what is expected of the VISTA member is extremely important. VISTAs come in and they're like, I don't know exactly what I'm supposed to do, and they come to PSO and they're nervous and they're scared, and having a supervisor who really understands the meat of what they're going to be doing is extremely important.
Absolutely. And know that if you don't at this point as a supervisor, you can get familiar. So,
exactly.
yeah, it's great that you're on this call too.
All right, I'm going to turn it back over to you, Mike.
Turn it back to me? Okay, great. So let's talk about the coaching supervisor. I think as Jessica was commenting, a lot of these comments are right on, and I have found these 3 key skills to be very helpful to keep working on, and I keep growing and learning. To be a coaching supervisor, I need to be a really good listener. I need to be able to ask good questions, that art of inquiry. I also need to be good at both giving and receiving feedback. So we're going to start with a discussion on listening, and specifically the importance of engaged listening and its importance to a successful coach. Good listening takes effort. You'll see a visual of this book, Coaching Skills for Nonprofit Managers. Just say as an aside, go out and get that book or have your employer buy that book for you. It is incredibly practical and useful. We're pulling some pearls of wisdom from it for this webinar, but there's so much more in that would be well worth your time. So this book identifies 4 types of listening supervisors commonly do that I think are going to seem familiar to you. Superficial listening. I'm listening to you, but I'm distracted with my own thoughts. I don't hear you. In this situation, it's really all about me. Second one, self-referential listening. I'm listening to you, but I will nudge the conversation, so now it becomes all about me. Third one, fix-it listening. I'm listening to you, but I want to fix your issue by myself. In this situation, it's really all about me in relation to you. One thing I learned from this book, actually, is it points out that we actually get kind of a chemical rush. Serotonin is released when we get involved in fix-it or problem solving. Unfortunately, that's not always helpful for the people we're supervising, but we get a kind of rush out of it. So it explains the biology behind that fix-it listening. So let's look at engaged listening on this next slide. And this is really the bedrock of coaching. It's full attention listening with a focus on the person you're coaching without a reference to yourself. It's respectful and purposeful. It goes beyond trying to understand what people say. Its focus is on what they mean, and sometimes even more important, what is meant by what is being left out of the conversation. So as I'm sitting here with my computer and my phone and my iPad for this webinar, I am thinking this is that time I put aside those devices and I sit and look at them and listen and not let the text coming in and emails coming in distract me. So let's look at inquiry. As we listen to our VISTA members, we of course know that being able to ask good questions will help us get to what's important. We use closed-ended conversations and questions to gather information. We use open-ended questions to open up conversation, to explore multiple possibilities, to allow your VISTA member to lead conversation. Sometimes open-ended questions can be too open, however, or be something that becomes rote. I can tell you already today, I've asked people and been asked about 5 times, how are you? And my answer, as you probably could guess, was fine. So while it's an open-ended question, it's kind of turned into this pretty closed experience. In a coaching conversation, you want to ask questions that help this beyond the one-word answers. Instead of how are you, perhaps, what was the highlight of your weekend? Or what did you do last night? And as we look at why questions, as someone who's trained in crisis counseling, one of the things we trained our volunteers in the line to do is never ask why, because why puts people on the defensive. Try using what questions instead. For example, instead of why did you choose to do it that way, what led you to that choice? On a rare occasion, if you have good rapport with your VISTA, you might ask why questions. I can imagine you're writing an agreement together. You purposefully want to challenge each other to think critically about why a funder should fund us. So imagine we are in the shoes of the funder, generally speaking, why questions can be reframed using what, and it feels much less like a question asking us to prove ourselves. Let's look at some examples of good questions. I think it's good to have a set of go-to questions. In fact, The book I reference has a worksheet that has you fill out some good questions that are go-tos in a coaching conversation. So let's look at these. For example, what's most important for us to talk about today? What do you mean by that? What options are you considering? What worked? I might add, what didn't work? What did you find challenging? What would you do differently next time? What do you think are our next steps? All these are sample questions that are open-ended in that they require more than just a yes or no answer. All are open but do have a direction. These are questions I'd imagine using in my regular one-to-one meetings with VISTA members. A really effective coach can help their vistas find their own answers to challenges by simply asking good questions. Okay, time to look at another challenge. My VISTA member is doing everything wrong. Well, first of all, a strong coach does aim to be objective. As many vistas are learning new skills in a new workplace, it can be easy to jump into evaluation of a member's performance too quickly. A strong coach aims to be objective. To do so, we need to be able to name the behaviors we are seeing and resist the temptation to evaluate, interpret, or judge that behavior when talking to them. We might recommend giving feedback regularly increases member satisfaction. I have found this framework that you see on this slide for providing feedback very helpful in guiding me to be a more effective coaching supervisor. I'm going to discuss each of these three skills in more depth as we address additional member challenges: objective observation, appreciative feedback, and developmental feedback. So let's first look at objective observation, which literally means articulate what you see without interpretation, evaluation, or judgment. This can be challenging because it's human nature to interpret, evaluate, and judge, and we need to do that in our work. But we become more effective when we can start with the observation. This is going to be your key to both the appreciative and developmental feedback. Let's look at an example of objective observation. Harriet has been talking too much and taking up too much time in meetings. So that is an example of evaluation. Let's look at this example of observation without evaluation. Harriet spoke 5 times during the last meeting in comparison to other staff who spoke once or twice. I also noticed she spoke an average of 4 minutes, while other comments were a minute or less. Okay, pretty wordy, but it really gets down to what is fact. Here are tips on how to make an objective observation. In this case, focus on Harriet's behavior. Focus on the person's behavior. So in this case, Harriet. Pretend you're taking a video of that person and then playing it back. What would you actually see or hear? Ask yourself, what would other people see or hear if they were watching that video or watching the situation? Get specific and note exactly what the person said or did. Say what you observed without judgment. Okay. Third challenge, we'll be able to apply that past skill here. My VISTA member is unmotivated. A strong coach can motivate through positive and constructive feedback. So note, this statement, my VISTA member is unmotivated, is an evaluation. Step back from that evaluation and take note of the behaviors that you have assigned to being unmotivated. Have you had a conversation about how motivated they are or not? Perhaps they're motivated but are not receiving the support they need to be successful at the task. Vistas who are developing their skills will need more direction in order to become motivated. Also, a strong coach can motivate through positive and constructive feedback. Or as the coaching skills book that I referred to, it calls it appreciative and developmental feedback. Let's look at appreciative feedback. This quote stood out for me from the coaching skills book. People get on average only a couple of minutes of positive feedback each year versus thousands of hours of negative feedback. And much of that feedback, mind you, is not very specific, so I'm going to talk about that as well. So let's look at a formula for appreciative feedback. Observation of the behavior plus appreciation of the positive impact of that behavior equals supporting and encouraging of that current positive behavior. Let's look at some specific examples of how to use this formula. I have said this, maybe even today, great job. To my 4-year-old daughter, I say great job a lot. And because I do this training a lot, I think, okay, how can I be more specific? Or in the workplace, I've said, nice work on that proposal. Both are well-meaning, but could be more effective if we want to reinforce the behavior. So too often, we give very generic feedback. The more specific we can be, the more effective our feedback is in reinforcing those positive workplace behaviors. and ultimately helping amplify their strengths, allowing us as supervisors to increase the capacity of our programs. Here are some tips for appreciative feedback. One, start with the observation as we practice with the Harriet example. With what positive action, behavior, demonstrated quality did you observe? Example, great job can become, I noticed over 20 people attended the volunteer orientation. Step 2, reflect back on your observation based on facts. Now you've created acknowledgement. Example, that is twice as many people as our last volunteer orientation. Step 3, communicate what that behavior means to you or the impact that it's made to the team, project, or organization. When you add this appreciation to your acknowledgement, you give meaning to that person's behavior. Example, I'm so excited by what this means for our clients. We will be able to serve twice as many people. Thank you for your hard work at turning people out for this orientation. Your hard work at outreach paid off. Okay, let's go to the harder one, developmental feedback. I'm going to give you a formula again. Nice to have formulas, right? Observation plus impact of behavior plus request for future equals improved behavior or performance. This is the most challenging. Let's look at an example to make this more real. Again, we're grounding it in that observation without evaluation. I'm taking kind of a basic example, but it happens to almost every supervisor, the late person. So observation, John, I noticed that our last 3 Monday morning 9 a.m. team meetings that you arrived after 9:20 a.m. No, I'm even making a point here of making sure I'm noting the fact, the time, so it's not arguable. Even saying that they were late suggests an interpretation or evaluation. You want to start with observation and just make sure you have agreement on that. So you say the observation, pause, you might see what they have to say, and then you say the impact of the behavior. I'm concerned that you're missing out on valuable information. Also might miss out on some of the relationship building we're doing on our staff team. Be careful about describing your impact by not interpreting the behavior as disrespectful, unprofessional. That is subjective. What means respect to you may be very different to your VISTA. And then you want to have a request for the future as part of this conversation. I want to remind you that attendance at these staff meetings is a very important part of your year of service. I would like to request that you arrive by 9 a.m. And if you're going to be late, please text me. I do recommend, of course, not just doing this in a formulaic way, but do it as a conversation, allowing your VISTA to react to what you were saying. I'd like to give you a few tips now for giving the feedback beyond just the formula. Posted in the chat box, you'll also see a link to a worksheet that will help you in preparing to give developmental feedback. I found this worksheet very helpful, actually, in prepping for hard conversation. So 1, prepare. Use the developmental feedback handout to write down key things that you want to say, especially when the stakes are high. Check your attitude. Can you set aside anger, resentment, frustration you have? If not, wait until you can. Ask permission to give your feedback if the situation allows. Timing is everything. Address one issue at a time. Resist the urge to deal with multiple issues at once. Pick the most urgent when there are many. Do not blame. Stay on track. Meaning, if you got multiple issues, don't try to tackle too many at once. Stay on the issue. Check it out. There are 2 sides to every story. Do you have a conversation, not a lecture? Ask their perspective. Help the person move forward. Do not leave without having tangible next steps you both will take. Okay, so let's move into some best practices for creating a feedback culture. And I find if you have a feedback culture, that developmental feedback conversation will be much easier. Too many supervisors wait to have the difficult conversations until the performance review and then overwhelm members with all the feedback they should have been given all along. One of the best ways to build trust and have your feedback be heard is to invite your member to give you feedback. For example, check in with your VISTA member by asking, are you getting the support you need to be successful in your position? The best way to create a culture where VISTA staff, volunteers, and interns are receptive to feedback is to model your comfort with getting feedback. Another example question you could ask, what is one thing I could do to provide better support to you? Just naming it as one makes it a lot more easy to answer that question than tell me something I could do better. They say, what is one thing I could do to provide better support to you? One of my past jobs where I served as a VISTA supervisor, we ended each meeting with appreciations. We scheduled 5 to 10 minutes at the end of each meeting to allow all staff members to provide positive feedback, praise, kudos, and compliments to another colleague for a specific action or task. It was a great way to end the meeting. Now I'd like to invite Erin, our other presenter, to present her hands-on experience as a VISTA supervisor. Erin?
Thank you, Mike. I'm excited to share some tips that the Lake Effect Leaders, which is the name of our VISTA project, have used to address common member challenges. I have the privilege of directing the Lake Effect Leaders, so named because of our location in northwestern Pennsylvania near Lake Erie and the Lake Effect Snow region. We are uniquely coordinated by a 3-college university partnership, including Allegheny College, Gannon University, and Mercyhurst University. And we're entering our 13th year of the project, so we've had lots of experience with lots of VISTA members over the years, with typically 25 plus each year. And during my time at Allegheny, I've definitely had some of the struggles that you've already mentioned and that some of our participants are also having. But through some visioning, trial and error, we have discovered some key strategies to how to best address member challenges and thus improve and increase our VISTA member satisfaction and ultimately meet project goals. So I thought it might be good if we revisited what common member challenges you have experienced. And some of you have shared these when you registered, but it'd be helpful for us if you could answer our poll question, what member challenges do you experience most often? And then I can kind of curtail, my piece of what's worked for us at Allegheny. So go ahead and answer the poll question. While you're doing that, I'll share a little. Our VISTA members are definitely outstanding assets to our organizations. We serve as a sponsor for this year 30 sub-sites. But we know that when our members come in, they're not completely polished. So prior to taking the reins of the Lake Effect Leaders, our projects really struggled with retention. The summer I joined the project, 31 VISTA members were recruited. But of those 31, 4 chose not to serve, so they didn't end up going to PSO, which meant we didn't fill those spots. So some of you have probably experienced that. Another terminated middle of the year, and another struggled significantly and needed reassigned a different project. So from that experiences, we worked really hard with our project's leadership to implement some targeted retention strategies. And these included having a clear recruitment plan, understanding the life cycle of a VISTA member, and investing in providing environments for them to flourish, which included front-loading support and training. I'm going to wait to see some of your responses to that whole question. Okay. We might have lost some of you, so come back with us. I see a lot have no answer. But I also see that definitely the professionalism is an issue, supervising effectively, and then some conflict resolution. And I do have some good strategies around that. So to address professionalism challenges, we have found that being proactive and anticipating challenges has been really helpful. So we anticipate specific member challenges beginning as early as our first interview with that member. In that first interview, we gather information through what we consider a vetting process to see if that member is going to be a good fit for our VISTA project. So in that, we ask some real specific questions to kind of get at the meat of what might that particular member need support around. So we ask candidates to describe a project that they have completed from start to finish. So whether it was something academic, service-related, work-related, but ask them to say whether it was assigned to them or they created it, how they moved from the inception of that project to the finished project. And then that kind of helps us to guide, are they going to need us to outline tasks on a larger project, or can they create tasks in that project themselves? It also lets us know, can they set goals? Can they time manage? We definitely ask how a year of professional service fits into their overall professional goals so that we know going in what are their next steps. What might they do after VISTA and how can we position them well for that? We ask them what areas they feel they need to develop professionally. And then most importantly, we ask them how they like to be supervised. And by knowing how they like to be supervised, it helps us to best match them with specific projects, knowing our site supervisors and how our site supervisors tend to supervise. We can help to guide our members towards specific sites. And I think that's something that everybody can do in an initial interview, is ask how someone likes to be supervised. It sets the culture of supervision in your organization, that is part of what everybody does, and it's not for when you're in trouble, but it's to help and coach and mentor you, as Mike has talked about earlier. So these questions in an initial interview help to allow us to be proactive and provide some proactive support. By knowing what typical VISTA members struggle with, we can front-load interventions to address those needs. We also consider the life cycle of a VISTA year, knowing that members come in very extremely enthusiastic. If we go back to Mike's initial slides around where they are developmentally, we know they come in really excited. We know that about 3 to 4 months into service, they might start to hit walls, like they might not know how to do certain things. They might lose their enthusiasm. We typically know that if we provide a lot of support around that time, it helps to help them typically rebound about 6 months in, where they can really start to dig in. They start to really understand how to ride that bike and it generate more enthusiasm for their work. And then we know that then they can have a strong finishing year. And if we know what their next steps are and help to guide them towards those next steps, then we know that we've got them tied in for the rest of the year versus, you know, maybe losing some enthusiasm in those last couple months. We also consider things like their learning curves, like what do they need to get up to speed, what training needs do they have, and what kind of personal challenges might they have. Front-loading your work around member challenges decreases your interventions. For example, relocating VISTAs who are relocating, they may definitely need some help adjusting or settling in. So ask questions to gauge how they're doing in that process. Provide resources right up front about where they can shop, where are entertainment, where might they work out. And then check in frequently initially to see how is that going. And then maybe as they really settle in, you can back off of some of that front-loaded work. If a VISTA is expected to make a cold call, but has indicated in an initial interview that that's a challenging part of professionalism for them, then you might add a front-loaded coaching around that. Help them write a script, provide an opportunity for practicing it, role model it for them. So just know what they need and try and front-load the interventions proactively so that you're not fixing problems. We have also found that setting clear expectations concerning professionalism is very beneficial. So over-communicate your rules, policies, and procedures of your organization right up front, right in your on-site orientation. They should clearly know what is expected of them, and it's helpful if they have those expectations in writing. These might include what the dress code is, what their work hours are, how to call in when they're sick, how to address other coworkers in your organization, whether it's okay to work with an office door closed if they have an office door to close, or whether that's not quite the culture of your organization. We really stress over communication. We find that our members think they're communicating really well when they send a text or an email and they don't get a response, and I'm like, but I've reached out. We say, I encourage them to communicate in a way that might feel over-communicating to them, and then that's probably just about right. Know that members really struggle with talking to people on the phone or walking over to someone's office and asking a question. So I tell them how to communicate with me, and then I provide role modeling in everyday work. Concerning some supervision challenges, so some other things that have worked at Allegheny. Know that VISTA members typically do not walk in your door completely polished the way you need them to be. I know that I need to put in a lot of work with them to get them where I want to be. I need a role model, I need to coach them and provide the opportunities to get them where we'd like them to be. We try to be attuned to differences in personality and work style. So we often use in our on-site orientation Myers-Briggs type indicator personality test or Clifton Strengths Finder, not so that we can analyze our members around their personalities, but more to assist members in being self-aware of their needs and for us to know how to best interact with those members. So for example, I tend to be an extroverted individual, especially in the work environment. So in working with a member who tends to be introverted, I might provide them before meetings with agendas, bullet points. Even prior to supervisions, I might give them an agenda, let them know what I want to talk with them about, and give them an opportunity to tell me what they want, to think about what they want to talk about in supervision, and then provide some more time for contemplating responses in meetings, allow for silence. I might know that they need to work with a closed office door, and definitely I'm generalizing about extroverts and introverts, but by using those MBTIs or strengths finders, it opens the door to discuss how to work with each other, recognizing and honoring difference in work styles and personalities. I definitely think that it's crucial to establish a supervision schedule and stick to it. This is often very hard for overwhelmed and busy supervisors, but by canceling supervisions, we send messages to our VISTA members that their project and their work is not important. Think about, in your organization, who is the right person to supervise? It might not be an executive director because you tend to be too busy, but maybe someone that works much closer to the VISTA member on a project would be a better choice. And definitely in those supervisions, pull out your VAD, your VISTA assignment description, and revisit it and use it to guide your conversation. For those of you, a few that have indicated that motivation is a challenge, I say be very responsive. We have found that VISTAs lose motivation when they're working on a project and are being held up waiting for supervisory approval, or they're unclear how to do a project and aren't comfortable asking, have missed supervisions with you, so the times when they might have asked the questions they haven't been able to, or are feeling that they're not part of a team, aren't heard, or aren't important. So to help with those motivational things, I say good morning, check in, how are things going? If they ask for feedback and I can't respond to that or review it or edit it quickly, I give them a time when I will respond so they know when they can expect it. I let them know my schedule and really transparent about when I'm in the office, when I'm out of the office, and what my workload looks like so that they can gauge their work around of my workloads. And I let them so that it tends to buy them in and keep them motivated. As for those of you who have talked a little bit about conflict challenges, I find that when you are proactive and you set clear expectations and you have regular supervisions and are very responsive to your members, conflicts tend to be at a minimum, but not completely. We definitely know that when we're doing all the things that we say are best practices and we still feel like we're working harder than the VISTA member to get the VISTA member to complete their tasks and projects or to act professionally or remain motivated, then we know that we have to step up our interventions. And for us at Allegheny, this includes creating development plans. And I know that we provided some sample development plans in the attached documents that you might want to refer to. But development plans establish in writing expectations for VISTA member behavior. So our plans are in writing, have clear timelines or periods to address challenges, clearly outline the need areas by category for with action steps, discuss follow-up actions, and set a fair consequence. In the 7 years that I've been with this project, we have not terminated one VISTA that we've placed on a development plan. Sometimes we've had to extend those plans or adjust action steps, but the plans seem to be mutually beneficial. VISTA members tend to respond very favorably and encouraged by your investment in their success. And when you look at both of the examples that have been provided, each addresses professionalism, but in a specific way to the specific deficit behaviors that that particular VISTA member is demonstrating. So it's very important to make them specific, make them relevant to their VADs. The longer of the two documents lists several professional aspects. The shorter is specifically focused on accountability, showing up on time, clearly communicating whereabouts. And from our perspective, development plans are usually necessitated after I've met with a VISTA member one or more times, have been in contact with site supervisors, either in person or on the telephone. And once it's decided that a development plan is necessitated, I definitely meet with a VISTA member and site supervisor together and identify together what areas are of challenge and what need to be addressed, what the time frame is going to be, and what the follow-up meeting date is going to be at the end of that time frame. And then I let both the site supervisor and the VISTA member know that I'll draft the letter and send each a copy. But I'm very, very clear with the VISTA members about that they're a valued member of our project and that particular host site, and we really want them to succeed, and this is part of their success. And so from this, I'm definitely speaking as a sponsor in initiating a development plan, but I think that sites can also initiate plans very effectively, you know, keeping your sponsor clearly in that communication loop, or your state program officer. But I think sites can effectively do this before it even gets to the level of a sponsor or the state program officer. And if you have questions about that, I'm happy to answer them at the end of the call. But at this point, I'd like to turn it back over to Mike.
Thank you, Erin. Lots of great tips in here that really, I think, brought to life some of the content that I was covering earlier. I especially like the piece around the development plan. I'm very impressed with your retention rate and not having to terminate someone in 7 years. That's super impressive. So we have a couple more slides, and then we'll get to some quick questions. Challenge 4, one of the themes that came up, is unclear how much responsibility my VISTA is ready for. Well, certainly Erin provided lots of handy tips in regard to this challenge, but as she said throughout, Strong Coach provides a clear playbook. And that using that situational leadership model, you know, learning to delegate can sometimes be a challenge, and having trusting to delegate, but that can be very helpful. Providing this note with explicit goals and expectations, as Erin said throughout her presentation. And then one of the best ways to clarify goals and expectations is learn your members' level of readiness for each new task. As we'll keep reiterating here, is to have regular one-on-one meetings. And so here we want to engage you all again. Do you have regular one-to-ones with your member? So you'll see a poll that just came up with some options. Yes, we meet, but not regularly. Or C, I rarely meet with my member. D, I never meet with my member. Or E, what's a one-to-one meeting? So please be honest. We really are curious about how frequently these are or are not happening. We know you all are busy, but we'll make this a very quick poll because I'm watching the clock tick on here. But we'll look to see. It's also be a test for how many are still on the call.
Thanks, Mike, and thank you, everyone. As Mike just said, I know we're running up close to the hour, and we definitely do want to respect your time. As I say that, though, we would also love if you could stay with us. We do have some great points here that we're going to be talking about. We want to make sure that you can enjoy all of this webinar, but we also understand the busy lives of supervisors. So if you need to drop off, we completely understand, but we will stay on. We will continue. We will answer questions at the end. So it looks like that poll is shutting down right now, so we're almost with our data here. I really hope I don't see any what's a one-to-one meeting. I hope that's not one. Hopefully, if you as a supervisor have a supervisor that they meet with you on one-to-one, so hopefully you have at least some experience with that. So let's see as we wait for these results to come in. It should be here any second. All right, just about there. It's like watching paint dry, right? When you're waiting for it, it doesn't come.
Hey, Jessica, this is Scott. For some reason, we're having a little WebEx glitch with the poll results going, so let me jump in and say that we had about 32 of 93 said yes, they have regular one-on-one.
Oh, good. Yeah.
9 said we meet but not regularly. 1 said I rarely meet with my member. None said they never meet. And 1 said, "What's a one-to-one meeting?"
All right. At least there wasn't a single never. Okay.
Great. Well, thank you for answering that. I'm sorry we had a glitch there. As you might guess, if you haven't got it down already, having regular meetings is important. So let's look at the next slide, some best practices around meetings that we found, or I have found. Regular meetings, weekly or bi-weekly, are helpful. Regular check-ins are, we feel, a must. We find that a weekly or even bi-weekly regular check-in with your business members is best to ensure they're getting the support they need. These meetings are the best opportunity to check in and provide guidance to your member. As you see there, structured meetings with outcomes, agenda, schedule, a balance of both task and relationship building. Here's a meeting agenda I follow that has worked well for me over the years on the next slide here. Having a regular structure to your week meetings can help you be more efficient with your time. So I always do a check-in, name a high and a low from the last week. Be clear about why we're meeting, what do we want to accomplish at this meeting, and then task review from the prior week, agenda items for this week, engage your member in creating that agenda as well, reviewing schedules and tasks for this week, closing and meeting evaluation. We use Google Docs a lot, so we just have a running agenda that folks can, my staff team could add to at any time. And then as you have many items to discuss, I recommend doing an easy one first, and then making your most challenging items second so that you have adequate time to deal with that. I've been to too many meetings where we leave the really hard items to the last and we don't get to it, and the decision doesn't get made that we need to make, or the assignment doesn't get assigned. So let's recap here and close out our hour together. Our recap, so retention of business members is supported when the coaching supervisor applies coaching skills at the right time. Successful supervisors know when and how to apply coaching skills that support effective communication, engaged listening, objective observation. The situational leadership model can be used as a guide for understanding how and when coaching is most needed. As supervisors develop coaching skills, they are building the level of trust needed to address any challenging, sensitive issues and circumstances. Like anything, learning the skills of a successful coaching supervisor takes time and practice, and in the end, pays off as it builds capacity of the VISTA members to move our work forward. Wanted to share a few of my favorite resources. I mentioned the Coaching Skills for Nonprofit Managers book. There's another recent book that came out called Thanks for the Feedback, The Science and Art of Receiving Feedback Well. And Compass Point is a great national clearinghouse for resources and training focused on nonprofits. So next steps for you all. Incorporate the feedback models we discussed in the webinar when working through challenging conversation with your VISTAs. Schedule a one-to-one meeting with a VISTA and look at DevAd. Identify together the developmental level they're at in each of the major task areas. Ask them, what is one thing I could do right now to better support you being successful in your year of service? Encourage them to give you feedback and ask them how they like to get feedback. Thank you for letting me spend this time with you. I always love talking to VISTAs and VISTA supervisors, and I'll hand it back to Jessica at this moment to kick off Q&A.
Thanks so much, Mike, and thank you, everybody. Thanks to both Aaron and Mike there. You guys did some great work. And so we want to get to the questions that you guys all have, but first we would like to ask that you take our evaluation. It's an evaluation of how you liked this presentation, what you learned, what you'd like to see in the future. I get very excited to see these at the end once you guys fill them out and once we can compile all the data. We love to be able to improve our webinars, so any feedback you can give us is always greatly appreciated, especially if it's we love Aaron and Mike and we want to bring them back every single webinar. That's great feedback as well. So please take some time to do that, and then we'll move on to the Q&A. So before we go to the questions that came in the chat, I just wanted to talk to the operator and see if he can let us know how to ask questions by the phone. Operator, are you there?
Yes, I am. At this time, if you would like to ask a question over the phone line, please press *1. Please unmute your phone and record your first and last name clearly when prompted. Your name is required to introduce your question. To withdraw your question, you may press *2. Once again, at this time, if you would like to ask a question over the phone line, please press *1.
Thank you so much. And also, if maybe you're listening through the webinar itself, through your computer, you can always ask questions in the Q&A, and we already have some that have come in. And these are some good ones. You guys aren't giving me little weak ones, which is fantastic. So this is both for Aaron and Mike, so I'd love to hear both of your opinions as you've both supervised VISTA members. June here said, where are the boundaries with professional mentoring and coaching? If my VISTA is dealing with a lot of personal problems, what is my responsibility to help them deal with these issues or to even ask about them? So let's turn it to Mike, and then we'll go to Aaron. And what would your thoughts be here for June?
I wanted to answer. No, I'll go ahead. You know, I think member to member, you find that there's slightly different boundaries with each. And I have sort of a formula, and it's not precise, but I do tend to be a little bit less personal in the beginning and open up as the year goes on. And it kind of follows how we naturally learn to trust each other, but I also have open conversations about what does support look like to you, you know, what is your comfort level with sharing about your personal life, and then I'm also modeling quite a bit. Certainly I do think in the case of VISTA and AmeriCorps members, I find a little bit of an increased sense of responsibility about making sure they get the personal support they need, and whether that's me or referring them to someone else to get that, it depends on my relationship with them. But we often get people in transition, and with transition comes a lot of stress. And so I want to be a supporter, and certainly I support my other staff as well, but there tend to be not as many of those issues that come up with my other staff as I've found with AmeriCorps and VISTA, just being that it's a built-in transition. Aaron, what have you thought?
Yeah, Mike, I would agree with you that I tend to feel more responsible for VISTA members than other staff in my office around personal problems and helping them transition well, as many of our VISTAs are young professionals. But I think if the relationship is not there to be able to address personally, when the personal issues become professional issues, then you're able to then address it very effectively, right? So if, for instance, we had a member that maybe had some issue with drug and alcohol abuse in the past, and maybe we couldn't address that particularly, but we could address the fact that that individual was not showing up to work on time and offering support around, okay, you know, using the things that Mike had reiterated earlier about being very clear and factual about when the person was to be at work, and when that person wasn't at work and we knew it was kind of for professional or personal reasons, we could then address it very effectively. So I think when it spills over into clear professional issues, then you can more easily address it if you don't have that kind of relationship with your VISTA member.
Great, thank you both. And both Rachel and I have also posted some links into the chat. We did, this is, as we mentioned, it's retaining VISTA members at 201. We did one last year. We did another webinar that focused most on, you know, working with emotional support and touched a little bit on mental health. So we did post a link to those webinars, to that webinar for you to view on demand that talks a little bit more about the personal issues that may be going on with VISTA members, so that can also help as well. But great suggestions, Aaron and Mike, and thank you, June, for that question. I'm going to turn it over to the operator. Operator, do we have any questions on the phone?
I'm showing no questions on the phone line at this time.
Okay, great. Thank you. I think it's been almost a year since we've actually had a question over the phone on one of these webinars. So if you do call in on the phone or have a question, please just write in the chat and I'll look at it, and we'll make sure that we get to the phone. We also have another question here that came in from Marie. She said, I have a VISTA that I have done these steps with multiple times, some of the steps that I think both Aaron and Mike, you discussed. And she says that it improves for a bit, and then that negative behavior, that things that she's been running into, returns. At what point do you determine if it's time to cut losses? Before I turn it over to Mike and Aaron, I just want to remind VISTA supervisors, you know, definitely if there's a process of something that you need to remove someone from service, please understand that you're not, the approval for removing someone from service stays with the state office. You can definitely recommend to them that, but that, like telling them that they can no longer show up to site, has to lay with the state office. So if you have any questions specifically, or if it gets to that point, please let your state office know, and they'll let you know the correct measures to follow. But on the topic of, I've gone through these steps, we've tried to rectify it, but then it slowly creeps back, that negative stuff that was coming in. How have you guys dealt with that? I'm going to go to Erin first this time, and then to Mike.
Thanks. One of the things I was going to reiterate is make sure you're talking with your sponsor or your state program officer and getting some guidance from them around those issues of at what time is it time to cut your losses, because I think they're very helpful in helping determine that. But I would say from my perspective, is there progress towards the VAD and towards the overall project plan? And if you are making progress, then in some ways I think it's better to keep a member that is making some progress towards an end goal, because otherwise, if you say, as you're saying, cut your losses or work with the state office to terminate that VISTA, then essentially you might have no work going on. So that would be my gauge, is to at what point are they being detrimental to the other employees or the project as a whole, or are they slowly making some project and you need to front load a lot along the way? That would be my suggestion.
Yeah, Erin, you hit the point. I think I don't need to say more. I think it's, what kind of impact is it having on our day-to-day programming, and to the extent that, it is having a significant impact, then it might be time to, as this language uses, cut losses or find a new place for that person to serve, or,
Thank you, Mike, and thank you, Erin. So we also have a question here that came into the chat. So Deborah here said we have weekly staff meetings with all staff. It sometimes makes it difficult to hold weekly or bi-weekly one-on-one meetings with everyone. Is once a month for a one-on-one frequent enough for your VISTA members? And Mike so diligently responded that, if you're having weekly meetings as a staff, if you're touching base with your member, that less often one-on-ones can be okay. One thing I would like to encourage, and Erin and Mike, if you have other suggestions, please chime in. I would definitely like to recommend that you keep a relationship with your VISTA open, that if they need something, if they need to follow up with you on something, that they can give you a call, or that they can, if you have an open door policy, that they can knock in and they have a quick question. That's one of the things that we see is, like, from VISTAs, I haven't seen my supervisor. I only, she never says anything to me. I don't see her. I only see her once a month. Like, we, sometimes they don't feel supported. So knowing that you're there, even if you don't have something scheduled regularly, for your VISTAs to know that that they can come and talk to you if something does arise that they need to meet about, that you're available. Mike, Erin, do you have anything else to add on that?
I would just say that I don't think that weekly staff meetings are a substitution for one-on-one meetings with VISTAs, because from my experience, a weekly staff meeting has an agenda and does not have time for them to ask personal questions about specific projects. So if you have a time or an open door policy where they have a designated time where they know they can stop in and ask those questions, then that might be okay, but I wouldn't substitute a weekly staff meeting for a one-to-one supervision.
Yeah, I would just say I think it depends on the VISTA, but you could, one way to deal with the time issue is sometimes I've alternated all staff meetings with one-to-ones so that I'm not, literally spending my weekend meetings and not getting to other work. That's another option, to do some alternation.
Great, thank you. And as Erin mentioned, and Erin and Mike both mentioned, work with your VISTAs. As we said, some maybe need a whole bunch of support. So definitely when someone is new coming on, making sure you make that time for your VISTA, making sure they feel welcome and they feel comfortable in their role, that they're getting that support that they need. They're probably raring to go. So as Mike said, they probably don't need all that encouragement, but they need support. And then as they can really get into the delegating mode, then you can go and delegate to them, and then maybe meeting less frequent will be okay as long as that open door policy is established. We also have a question here. It's around, it's retention, but it's around the economy as well. So with the improvement of the economy, retention for our program is primarily a challenge when it comes to accepting outside employment and not really dissatisfaction with the program. So this is a tough question. Mike, Aaron, do you have any tips on this? Or Aaron, I know that you're currently a VISTA sponsor, and I know you're going to be bringing on VISTAs here pretty soon. Do you have any tips on this or what you've done, or has this come up for you?
Absolutely. We really try and vet candidates to really get at, are they going to leave for the first position, job that comes along? And if they are, then we probably are not going to continue them through our interview process. That's one of the reasons we clearly ask that question about how does a year of professional service clearly fit into your overall professional goals. And so we really try and vet that, but the question is very valid because sometimes we can't get at that, and sometimes we will, have a member that is like, hey, I need money. And I had a VISTA this year that said, hey, I did want to do this. It does fit in my professional goals, but I'm getting married. I can't afford it. And I talked with her very clearly about how she can't afford not to finish her year. The Ed Award, they're not getting the Ed Award if they terminate early for, a non-medical reason or for leaving for a job. Our VISTAs are also allowed to have second positions, so it helps to remind them that they might have some nights and weekends free that they could supplement. And I talk to them, if you're interested in a position in the nonprofit sector, your best bet is to stay in and continue networking through the rest of your year to position yourself well to get a position that is going to be in your overall goal versus taking an hourly job. You'd also lose your other benefits that you get by being a VISTA. So even though your pay is small, the other benefits are so great that I try and remind them of that.
Yeah, I would just add, I know over the years that I supervised AmeriCorps and VISTA, we really worked on shifting our approach to recruiting from communities that we were already serving, and those were communities that were experiencing high levels of poverty even in good economic times. So we often, that way we get matching members that often took a little more time and energy to support, but it was actually a real, we don't call VISTA a job, but it was a real job opportunity for those folks and may not have competed well and, won't compete well for the jobs created by a better economy. And that way we feel better. We're sticking more to our mission and vision, that we aren't just putting people in the service who could find other jobs otherwise.
That's great. And Aaron, I do have to say, I love that, you really talk about the benefits of, of continuing and, how can you afford not to complete your service. I think that's fantastic. And it's these things that I wonder if people really, take into account when they're thinking about leaving service. It's a great way to make sure that they understand all of the benefits that come with national service. We have employers of national service. They get non-competitive eligibility. There are so many benefits to being a VISTA member. And one of the other takeaways I took from yours was that, really get this at the interview. So we know that, sometimes recruitment can be hard. Sometimes, you're trying to, find the best person, but you want to make sure that you find quality and that you take the time to interview them and make sure that this person is going to stick around and that, it's something that's, as Aaron said, like in their plan. Obviously, things come up that you can't control all the time, but definitely having people go in with that mindset, it speaks to better retention. So I'm going to ask the operator, do we have any questions on the phone?
I'm showing no questions on the phone line.
All right. So I think we've gotten to all your questions that you've put in the chat. There's a lot of great feedback in the chat panel itself about meetings and like what other people do. So that's really great as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to end here. I do just want to thank you all so much for sticking with us. I know it's a little bit over, but thank you so much. if you do have questions, if you leave this webinar and you're like, oh man, I didn't ask that question that was burning in my brain, you can email us at vistawebinars@cns.gov. We do look at it, we do respond, so please email us. And we do have another webinar coming up, Record Keeping and Reporting for AmeriCorps Vista Projects. This is one that we receive a lot of feedback from. We receive a lot of feedback in these evaluations about, we need a webinar on reporting, we need to know about reporting requirements. Well, you've asked for it and we're giving it to you. Next month, July 26th, 2 p.m., join us and we will talk about reporting and hopefully get some of those questions answered for you. So thank you all. Keep up the great work. Thank you for all you do to support your VISTAs, and have a wonderful day.